Depth of field in video and photography has to do with how much of an image appears sharp or in focus. One of the strongest advantages of shooting video on DSLR cameras is that you can get amazingly shallow depth of field, which until very recently was a pretty big challenge when shooting with video. To demonstrate depth of field, let's look at our footage right here, which is currently being shot with a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second and an aperture setting of f/22. Your depth of field depends on your aperture. Right now our aperture is set pretty high at f/22. So let's open up our aperture by holding the AV button on the back of the Canon T2i and sliding the shutter dial to the left. The lens we have on our camera right now is a fast lens, so our image pretty much bleaches out as we get to our lowest f-stop. Now what do I mean by fast lens? We've already looked at lenses and aperture. Each lens has a maximum and minimum aperture setting. Lenses with exceptionally low f-stops are known as fast lenses, because their apertures can get very wide, allowing you to get adequate light into your camera even at very fast shutter speed settings. Having said that, you can see that our image is currently overexposed because we've opened up our aperture but we haven't increased our shutter speed. So let's turn the shutter speed dial all the way to 2500. Notice that we're getting a much shallower depth of field with the lower aperture setting. Where we once had nearly everything in focus at f/22, now at f/1.8 only the first pole appears sharp. Shallow depth of field can be great for when you want to guide your viewer's eye from one subject to the next. For example, I can rack focus from the loop sign to, say, the woman with the dog by turning the focus ring and then bring the focus back to the sign, and your eye naturally follows what's sharp. While shallow depth of field can be a great creative tool, it does take a smooth hand and a bit of practice too. Also, it's very easy to overdo it. Shooting with greater depth of field is increasingly underrated, but having more of your shot in focus allows you to stage more complex and challenging shots, like this scene from Citizen Kane. The greater depth of field has allowed for 4 characters at various distance from the camera to all be in focus at once. Having a wider lens with a greater depth of field is often used in scenes that require a lot of camera movement, like this scene from Children of Men. Because there's greater depth of field, there can be more going on in a shot at once, and the actors don't have to worry so much about how close or far away from the camera they are. So, depth of field is controlled by aperture, and the amount of depth of field you want ultimately depends on what kind of shot you're going for.